Right, now that we have our basic cube created, let's take a quick look at the dimensions and measure groups. The dimensions are different ways that we can slice and dice our data. The measure groups is the data that we can slice and dice. So since we're going to do some trending on our key performance indicator, one dimension that we were interested in, or particularly interested in, is our date dimension. And if you look across the different measure groups, you'll notice that there's a date for certain measure groups and there's none for others. Where there is a date, that means that is a measure group that you can slice by date. So as we move through, the one that we're interested in is run coverage, and we can see that there is indeed a date for that, so that's something that we can slice and dice by date. Now let's go and deploy or build and deploy this project out onto our analysis services database. Okay, our cube is processed, so now it's sitting on our analysis services database. What we'll do next is create our calculated members. So we'll use a couple calculated members to calculate the values of our key performance indicator. First thing we'll look at is our percentage code coverage. We'll use an expression to determine exactly what this value is. Just make some room. This is a pretty easy expression to create. What we'll do is we'll look at our measures, and what we want to look at is our code coverage. Our blocks covered as a percentage of the total blocks in our system. If you remember, the code coverage that we gather in Visual Studio Team System is at the block level. So that gives you some pretty fine-grained analysis of what parts of your code is being covered and what parts are not being covered. In this case, our calculated member of percentage code coverage is just created by taking our blocks covered and dividing that by total blocks in our system. And we'll show that as a percentage. We also want to define a goal for our percentage code coverage. So we'll create that as a calculated member as well. In this case, we'll hard code this to, let's say, 60%. In this case, it'll also be a percentage. And those changes, let's redeploy our cube, and after that's done, we'll go ahead and create the actual key performance indicator. Okay, our cube's been processed, so now we have our calculated members. Let's go and create the actual key performance indicators. So our code coverage. For the value expression, so for the value of this key performance indicator, we'll just use that calculated member that we created, so our percentage code coverage. And the same is true for the goal expression. That's just the goal calculated member that we created earlier. Now things get a little bit more tricky. We'll look at the gauge. So the status indicator gives us a set of icons that we can use to represent different values of our key performance indicator. This is a big part of helping you represent a complex set of data with a very simple visual interface. For our status expression, we'll decide whether our gauge shows green for good, yellow for okay, or red for an error condition. What we'll look at is the values of our key performance indicator. So before I start this, I'm going to end this particular video, and we'll continue it on in our next one.